Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in.
It is Kate, Kelly, and PozzA here in the summer break. Well, it's summer for one member of this podcast, being Kelly, and it's winter for myself and PozzA, but we'll still call it the summer break because that's what Dorna call it. And this week, for some podcast content, I have asked all three of us to pick 3 winners and losers so far from the 2024 season. I'm just going to jump straight in with what is my biggest winner, and it's got to be Ducati because they are just so incredibly strong at the moment. The first 4 riders in the championship standings at the moment are all on Ducatis, and Maverick Vinales is the only rider in that top 5 not on one. And Vinales is nearly 100 points back from the championship leader, Pecco Bagnaia. And while we could argue that the mass exodus of riders that we'll see next year could be a bit of a cause for concern, it doesn't change the fact that Ducati dominance is just continuing this year. They've locked out so many Grand Prix podiums, and the last time we had a MotoGP Grand Prix podium, so the Sunday race, without a Ducati on it, was Circuit of the Americas, which is quite a while ago, and that had Pedro Acosta on it. I have a sneaking suspicion that at least one of you put Ducati or one of their riders as the winner, as a winner. So who wants to go first?
I will. So for my biggest winner, I think it's obviously the most basic option to put, but I did put Pecco Bagnaia. You can't say that he isn't a winner. He has been winning so many Grand Prix, a couple of sprints as well, shockingly enough. Like, you can't say that this man has been bad or mid at all this season. Like, he is the favourite for the championship, and I wholly believe that he will win it. Given that Jorge Martin, as fast as he is, that man cannot handle pressure for the life of him. Anytime he's aware that like Pecco or Mark is behind him, he just it's like he cracks and then he's just down and gone. So I can't really put him as a winner if he can't handle basic pressure. So I think Pecco is like the best one to go for, and he's definitely my number one.
Yeah, I've also gone with Pecco Bagnaia for mine. He's just looked so much better than pretty much the whole rest of the grid this year on the GP24. He's won the last, I think, last four Grand Prix, and in those races, he just didn't really look like, apart from Germany, he didn't look like he'd be challenged in any of the races. So I feel like again, he's probably favourite for the title just based on consistency on Sunday. Could probably use a bit of an improvement in the sprint races, but it does look like he's sort of found that recently. So yeah, I think he could be on for another consecutive title.
Pecco definitely looks like the man to beat, especially with, like Kelly said, the way Martin totally bungled it because Pecco kept that pressure on. Impressive that Pecco did just manage to keep that pressure on right up until Martin made that mistake and then capitalized big time. My next winner is probably a little bit different because I've actually gone with Yamaha. Now, it may be a bit strange to put such a struggling manufacturer on the list as a winner, but I have done because they've clearly shown signs of improvement and they've managed to secure Quartararo for a few more years. Not only that, they've also got themselves a satellite team for next year. And so, just given the fact that their future looks a bit more exciting and they're definitely in a much better place than they were at the start of the year, I've gone with them as my second winner.
That's odd, I'd say. I won't talk about who I have for the rest of mine yet, apart from my second winner, but I wouldn't say Yamaha has a winner per se, but I'll move on to my second winner anyway, just so I don't yap enough to that I spoil the rest of mine. I have put Mark Marquez as my second winner. I know, it's basic. Trust me, it get my prediction. My winners and losers do get a bit spicier, I promise. But for right now, Mark is definitely a winner. I mean, moving up from a Honda that was slow, dangerous, literally a death machine on wheels, going up to a Ducati, riding a bike, a spec that's literally a year older. I feel like he's just done so much to deserve that proper Ducati C, although it may not be sustainable for the near future, of course, because as much as none of us want to admit, he is getting older and that's just the run of things. But for now, he definitely, I think, has done enough to deserve that. And I think overall, this year, he is definitely a winner.
Yeah, as my second winner, I've actually gone for Fabio Di Giannantonio, just because at this stage of the season last year, especially, he was looking just completely lost on the Grissini, and obviously with the late season form, he sort of turned that around last year. But I feel like he's carried that form into the start of this year, and apart from the injury scare in Germany, he's looked probably the most comfortable of the riders on the GP23 apart from Marc Marquez, which is impressive because obviously none of the riders is going to beat Marc Marquez realistically. But yeah, he's outperforming his teammate, and he looks like he's on for to re-sign for that team next year with updated machinery next year. So it could be an interesting rest of the year and next year for Di Giannantonio.
Actually, right, just coming right off the back from that, I actually also have Fabio Di Giannantonio on my as my third winner. I feel like, as Paz said, he was slow at the start of the 2023 season. Like, it looked like he just had no form. He was lost. He was like a little lost puppy. He didn't know what to do. He was slow. He wasn't getting points. He was crashing. And we all believed pretty much that he was going to lose his seat at the end of the season. But then he pulled through. He was getting podiums. He was quick, and we all prayed to God that he would get a seat. And he finally, like, thankfully, got one at VR46, and we were happy with that. I was really happy with that. And it just seems like he's happier and more comfortable on that bike, which I'm happy to see as well. Of course, I mean, it's weird. It is weird, but it's weird to think about, but I'm happy. I'm really, really happy that he's improved his form, and I'd love to see if he can get another podium. Weirdly, on that VR46, he might not, but I'd love to see if he can get a podium this year.
And moving on to my final winner for the MotoGP class so far this year, I've gone with Maverick Vinales just because, well, first of all, he's became the first rider to win with three different manufacturers in the World Championship, which just in its own is sort of an impressive feat. But on top of that, he's also fifth in the World Championship at the minute, I believe, only behind Ducatis at the minute. So if he can keep up his form, which has been a problem in the past for him, he could do some good things this year, but it just comes down to consistency.
Funny you should mention Maverick Vinales, actually, because while he himself hasn't made my winners list, the team that he will soon to be riding for has. And my third winner is KTM and Tech3. I have sort of bundled them together, and while they do seem to have hit a bit of a wall so far this season, for example, like at the start of the season, they were, battling a bit more, or at least Pedro was. They've managed to pull off what I consider the biggest coup of the season with that silly season jackpot that they seem to have secured, because their lineup for 2025 is just so insanely solid. It's probably the most solid lineup in recent MotoGP history, at least I'd say since Repsol Honda ran their three bike team. They'll have three proven MotoGP race winners and one superstar rider who we can expect to only improve with time. And so, yeah, I have to give my third and final winner spot to Tech 3 and KTM as a whole.
It's interesting that you have KTM as winners on your list because I actually have them as my first big loser this year, just because I'm not sure if it's like development or just they haven't found a good setup to work with the bike yet. But it seems like pretty much every weekend, all four riders are complaining of some sort of issue. I think most recently Jack Miller was complaining that whenever they found a good setting for like the rear tire, the front end feeling would just disappear, and then as soon as they got the front end feeling back, the rear grip just completely dropped out. So I don't know if it's something with development or anything like that, but it just doesn't look like they've built anything close to really a competitive bike. Like obviously it's scoring points, but when the competition to score like low points is pretty much just the Hondas and the Yamahas, that's just not really good enough. But yeah, hopefully they can find something next year, especially with the stacked lineup that they have, and just sort of find some direction and get back onto sort of having a bike they can win races with.
I actually want to talk about one of Kate's winners, which was Yamaha, because I disagree. One of my losers, not the first loser, but one of my losers is actually Fabio Quartararo, because even though he does have a contract for another couple of seasons, which is great, and he's getting paid a lot, which is obviously also great, the bike isn't good. It hasn't improved in the format that like Kate made it seem. Yes, Yamaha has a satellite team in Pramac, which is great. So for the next season onwards, they're going to have like, I feel like they're going to improve from there. But this is the 2024 mid-season review, and in terms of performance, Yamaha is not there. You barely see them. Alex Rins, bless his heart, has been injured so many times that you never see his name on the leaderboard. Fabio Quartararo makes like one or two appearances, but they're just nowhere. And it's sad to see because I love Fabio. I mean, the man is a world champion, deservedly so, and I feel like he deserves a bike for a world champion. But that's his decision. He signed with Yamaha again. He's a grown man. I can't judge his decision. But for me, he's a loser this season.
My first loser is probably why I have put Yamaha high up, because my first loser's gotta be Honda, because they are nowhere. Not only are they nowhere, they're just like completely lost. And it's really sad and depressing to see as such a huge Honda fan. I have, yeah, followed Honda since, way back when Casey Stoner was rocking an LCR. It's just been quite a long journey, but seeing them go from such a huge high all the way down to pretty much the lowest of lows, their qualifying pace is almost that of Moto2 standards rather than MotoGP. It's just a little bit of a depressing place to be, and it's not particularly fun to be a Honda fan. So that's why they're my number one loser, I suppose.
Weird enough that you say that because I think for the first time this podcast episode that we've agreed. I have Luca Marini as my first loser. The man has had like one of the worst falls from grace I've seen within like the last year in their movements. Like he went from a VR46 where he was performing well. Like that man had good performances. He was podiums, doing well. I was like, okay, this is good. This is good. And then I saw Mark left Honda, and I was like, oh, I wonder who replaced him. Bam, Luca Marini to Repsol Honda. I was like, oh, literally, like literally, my physical reaction was, oh, like he's just been screwed over. That man has finished last, 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 second last, last the entire season. He got his first points barely, barely got his first points. That's how bad this Honda is, and I just feel bad for him. Like, how do you let that happen to yourself? What? How do you willingly, like, consciously sign for Honda at this moment in time? But once again, I'm not here to judge them. They're grown adults. They make their own decisions. But God, I feel bad for them.
And just to finish this off, I've also gone as Honda as one of my losers. They just felt like obviously the easiest choice. As Kate said, they've been absolutely nowhere. There's been races where riders have crashed out and then managed to come back and overtake every one of the Hondas and still score points. So it just doesn't really look like they have any sense of direction right now, and none of the updates they're bringing are working. Nothing really seems to be working for them. It is hard to see them turning it around before the next set of regulations come, which is kind of sad because they have some good riders coming through Moto 2 as well, such as Ayagura, and it does seem like he's sort of actively avoiding the step up by saying, "Oh, I want to win the Moto 2 championship first." So it even seems like the riders they have coming up are sort of stalling having to sign for them. But hopefully, eventually, they can find something to turn it around and start fighting at the front again.
I have to admit, Luca Marini did almost make my losers list, but then I figured it sort of was all encompassing in Honda being on the losers list. But yeah, we're all in agreement about the state of that bike and the riders in general as well. Instead of putting Marini on my losers list, I've ended up going with Jack Miller. Huge support for Miller on this podcast, being an Australian and us having started out as a Down Under podcast. But he's just cooks his tires like nothing else. He just barbecues them, and it's a bit ridiculous. That plus the fact that, he was told that he was going to be signing with Tech 3. They said that they want to keep him in the family. They want him to, sign with them, basically, in a word, I guess, a voice call or on the phone. And then he finds out, like, he gets a phone call saying in 3 hours we're announcing we've got all our team for next year and you're not on it. I think that's a bit brutal, and that plus his form, I think he's going to struggle to find a seat for next season. So, yeah, that's why Miller's my second loser.
Okay, and for my final loser, as much as it breaks my heart and just kills me off mentally to say, I've gone to Marco Bezzecchi. Um, I really, really hate to say it, but the man, he has a severe lack of luck for one, and then he just has not had any performances to back up this year. Like, he's been slow. He's just been slow. Yeah, it's not like he even crashed. He's just been slow and falling out of the points sometimes, and I just don't know what's wrong with him. Like, it hurts me because he was so good last year. That man was fighting for a championship title last year, and now he's just there. And I really hate to see it. That's why I was so excited for him to go to Aprilia, because I feel like he can really do something on that bike. I feel like it's a I don't want to blame the bike, but I feel like it's a problem between him and the bike that we don't know about. Like, there's obviously something he's really struggling with there, and we just don't know. But for now, he's a loser. There's nothing to back up me calling him a winner this season, so for now, he is a loser, and it's really painful for me to say.
My final loser is not didn't quite fight for a title last year, wasn't really up there in that sense, but at least he showed some promise last year. My third one is Augusto Fernandez because he had a P4 in Le Mans last year, which is pretty darn good for a rookie, and he has done nothing this year. He's picked up a few points here and there. Admittedly, he doesn't really have a teammate that we're able to compare him to because his teammate is Pedro Acosta, who is an incredible talent, who is just going to do great things and will override that bike. And yes, you could argue that he's, sort of on par with Jack Miller, but to have such a reasonable rookie season and then just dissolve into the distance, much like Jack Miller, we know he's lost his seat, but at least Miller has some previous year's performances that he can, I suppose, sell himself with. Augusto Fernandez definitely doesn't have that, and yeah, it's a real worry as to whether we will or will not see him on the grid next year.
And as my final loser, this is no reflection of him as a rider or anything. It's not like a personal dig at him, but I've gone with Alex Rins just because of all the injuries and struggles he's had on the Yamaha this year. Obviously, big crash in Assen. I think fractured his wrist and has been out. Missed the last race, being replaced by Remy Gardner. hopefully he'll be back fit for Silverstone, but he has been getting outperformed by his teammate Quartararo, which you'd expect, seeing as Quartararo's been on a Yamaha for years. But he still hasn't really been up there performing. He's been clear of the Hondas, but again, everyone else has been clear of the Hondas. It does. I don't know if he has a ride next year. I know he doesn't have one confirmed. It's just whether or not Yamaha decide to keep him in the form of either factory or the Pramac ride. But hopefully, he can find some form again and start fighting like we saw him up there a few years ago.
Yeah, and like you said, it's definitely us putting riders on the loser list are no way a reflection of what we think of them as people and riders themselves. It's just the situation they're finding themselves in. I don't know why I felt the need to also disclose that. It's not like they'd really care what three fans think on a podcast, but yeah, they're all incredibly talented. It's just unfortunate that the Honda's so rubbish right now, really, and the Japanese manufacturers are struggling. As always, let us know what you think. Were we too harsh on our losers list? Were we reasonable enough? And did we miss anyone that's had a stellar start to the season who should be on the winners list? Like and subscribe if you're enjoying this. We'll be back next week, and you all have a wonderful week.